we like to say that your business will only scale to the extent that you scale yourself. And if you're the visionary, if you're the CEO, if you're the top person in your company, you're the leader, whether you like it or not. How you behave, you are an example of what you want everybody else within your organization to do. So if you tolerate missed deadlines or missed meetings or unclear communication, then you're saying by example that that's okay within your organization.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 386. If you raise money from investors to fund your real estate opportunities, you're definitely going to want to listen to today's conversation. Stacey Gray helps real estate syndicators systematize their operations so they can raise more capital and do more deals faster. Over the past 2 decades, Stacey has built several multi-seven-figure businesses and now helps other entrepreneurs do the same thing through her company, Organized to Scale. Stacey, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here, Brian.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this space.
Like we were talking earlier, a lot of people get into the investing side of the real estate because they're so passionate about the deals, but forget the business side of it. So we were no different. I actually graduated high school at 16, and we were talking, my father's Russell Gray, co-host of the Real Estate Guys radio show. And when I was 16 and graduated, he didn't want me to go off to college. He said, how about you come work with me for the next 2 years? And if you still want to go to college, you'll be 18, you'll be the same age as everybody else, and you can go to college. I started answering the phones for him, and we did seminars and events. So I was taking registrations, and within 6 months, I was like, I don't want to be answering phones anymore. I don't like this. And he said, that's fine. You don't have to answer phones anymore, but you have to hire and train your replacement. And he handed me a copy of the book E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And I read that ferociously, and I was like, okay, now I understand what standard operating procedures are and workflows and processes. And so I started creating all of this organization so I can get out of answering the phones. Well, then I quickly realized that I also had to lead, manage, and hold accountable the person that I was replacing myself with. So then I started studying all the leadership and management books to figure out how I could be a great leader and create an environment for high performers to succeed. And that kind of just one thing after the other, and eventually moved to becoming the president of the Real Estate Guys and running their complete operations. And then I stepped away from that and built some other companies. And then my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in April of 2014. And my father called me and said, will you come back and run all of our family businesses for me again? And I said, yes, but I want time freedom as well. So I'm going to roll out this whole system for doing it. And that's what I did. And that actually is what became Organized to Scale. I didn't know it at the time. And now we run a 3-step process for organizing businesses to scale.
Let's start with the fact that your father is Russell Gray from the Real Estate Guys. And most people who listen to real estate podcasts know who the Real Estate Guys are. What was that like growing up, having that in your family, like that real estate knowledge and know-how?
It was not so much the real estate as much as it was the entrepreneurialism. So my grandfather actually came over from the Philippines when he was 14 years old and built a company to take public. And he really gave my father that same entrepreneurial spirit and that sales spirit. And then that kind of morphed into the real estate side of things as well. When you start making money, you start looking for tax havens, and real estate can be a great place to put it. So I started learning those things. But what he really taught me, what our dinner table conversations really were supply and demand and inflation and understanding the economics of it, which was really powerful. And then he also taught us a lot about deferred gratification. So the discipline of cash management and storing your savings for investing. And that really kind of shaped my psychology around money and my psychology around investing, but also my psychology around time. Like to use my time to develop a skill set that I can put that to use in an asset that then generates passive income that pays me. And I've done that multiple times, not just in real estate, but I kind of joke that even I create online real estate. I use landing pages to create cash flow from that perspective as well. So there's so many facets of what he shared with me that transcends just real estate investing, but it really is just business in general.
Let's skip over the part where you were running the real estate guy's business. And you went off and started your own companies to create like 7 figures or more in revenue. What were those companies and how did you apply that scaling system that you learned?
The 3-step process that we use to scale companies is, if you're a real estate our audience will really appreciate this. Step 1 is architect. And that's where the visionary, the person who has the idea for the business, works with a design team to architect the business. What's the blueprint for what we're going to achieve with this business? And then once you get that blueprint on paper, then that goes to a build team. And you can think of it like your general contractor, the person who then resources, gets the subcontractors and the materials that you need to build the essential infrastructure so you can operate that asset. And in our case, operate that business. And then the 3rd step is the operate phase, where all the essential infrastructure is built. And just like in real estate, you plug tenants in and a property manager in to maintain the property and take care of it. And we do that same thing in business, is we architect it with the visionary to get the structure right. Then it goes to the build team that develops it. And then we put team members, right, people in the right seats on the bus to pull all the levers and make it happen. When we were scaling businesses in the beginning, we had no concept of this. Sometimes we would hire people who are meant to be operators and just pull the levers and ask them to architect. And then you end up having such chaos, operational chaos, because you have the wrong people in the wrong seats and no baseline or foundation or structure that can be utilized to scale.
Walk us through one of your businesses and how you applied that specifically to that business.
Let's take syndicators, for example. Those are primarily what we focus on. Is we do a 3-day strategic planning session, and that's the architect step of the 3-step process. And that's where we identify for the visionary, what's your sweet spot? Where do you want to live within your organization? When it's at scale, do you want to be the brand ambassador, the sales rep, the deal junkie? Do you want to be the one who's creating content? Do you want to be the one who's actually operating it? What is it that energizes you that you want to do? So we can design the business around the lifestyle that you want, so you don't get trapped in it. Because most people set out to build businesses to create some type of freedom, but they end up trapped in the very things that are designed to create their freedom because they don't have the infrastructure and they don't really begin with the end in mind. They just get excited and get going, which is great, but you have to really architect it first. So we architect it around the sweet spot of the visionary. And then we say, okay, if this is where you want to live, what do you want the business to do? And what do you want it to serve in the marketplace? So if for syndicators, they may be focusing on multifamily syndication. They could be focusing on ground up development. They could focus on a portfolio of single family homes, and they may have a passion for changing neighborhoods, transforming neighborhoods and up-leveling them and giving the tenants in those communities a nicer place to live. And then they lead with that why. So they attract investors who really want those same things. And they go look for markets and neighborhoods and street corners that really allow them to utilize their skill set to its advantage. And then we say, okay, in 10 years, what does revenue look like? How many assets do you want under management? How much revenue do you want in terms of promote fees or acquisition fees? How much in terms of management fees? And then we say, okay, in order to achieve that number, say you want to raise 500 million. In order to achieve that number, what is everything that needs to be done in order to do that? You've got to build your brand. You've got to acquire investors. You've got to acquire and manage deals. You've got to do financial management and reporting. You've got to build and lead a team. There's so many things that go into it. And so then we map out what that looks like, which we call the 7 core functions of a syndication business, which are: how do you build your brand and network? How do you acquire and onboard investors? How do you communicate with active investors? How do you onboard and manage deals? How do you do financial management and reporting? How do you build and lead a team? And then interlaced through all of that is how do you stay legally compliant and manage risk? And then how do you prepare and present your offering? So we map all of that out for the syndicators so that they have a step-by-step workflow to execute, so they are confident they can go into the marketplace, generate capital for their deals, and they can throw it over the fence knowing that on the back end, their systems and procedures are tight because you're dealing with other people's money and you want to make sure you're taking care of it the best that you can.
The list you just gave would scare away a lot of people. Now, being a syndicator myself, raising money to do deals, I've fulfilled every one of those functions you just mentioned. And I've been somewhat successful in finding people that I can hire or bring on board to handle those at this point. But what do you say to someone starting out who looks at that list that you just gave and says, well, I don't want to do any of that? How do they scale without doing it themselves?
Zig Ziglar has a great quote. He says, you don't build a business, you build people, and people build the business. And it's really aligning around what are you building? Why do you want to build it? And who can you recruit to help you achieve it? And that's leadership, really. It's as you being the leader of your organization, how can you rally the troops to achieve what you want to achieve while you can be in your sweet spot and they can be in their sweet spot as well? Because then it's more fun, it's more energizing, and it's more profitable.
That word leadership, you just hit on something that I think is a differentiator there, because a lot of people do get into real estate investing, but they don't consider themselves to be leaders. And they kind of abdicate that responsibility to others. What's the downfall of not accepting your leadership role in your real estate business?
So we like to say that your business will only scale to the extent that you scale yourself. And if you're the visionary, if you're the CEO, if you're the top person in your company, you're the leader, whether you like it or not. How you behave, you are an example of what you want everybody else within your organization to do. So if you tolerate missed deadlines or missed meetings or unclear communication, then you're saying by example that that's okay within your organization. But if you want people to be on time to meetings and you want them to meet deadlines and you want them to be clear with their communication, then it's really critical that you model that. And there's a difference between delegating and abdicating. And I think sometimes we're overwhelmed with the thought of scaling a business, and we're even just in the weeds and the nitty gritty. And we're so happy when somebody comes along just to relieve us. So we sometimes just like throw up our arms and are like, take it, I can't handle it anymore. And that's really abdicating, and it's not really setting the person up for success. And usually what happens is it ends up being a boomerang. You give it to the person and then it comes back to you and it's messier. And then you just have this huge expense and you're frustrated and you feel like you have a revolving door of people because there's a lack of infrastructure, but then there's also a lack of accountability and clarity that really has to come from the leader. And then everybody has to submit to that structure and accountability for it to scale.
You stepped into leadership of the Real Estate Guys business. Was that a CEO or what was your position?
We call it the president. So Russ is really the visionary and was basically the integrator. And I think I have a unique experience because, are you familiar with the book Traction?
I am, the EOS system.
Yeah, the EOS model.
But please, for our listeners, give us a quick 30-second.
So Gino Wickman wrote a great book called Traction, and it's built on EOS, which they call the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it's a methodology for creating operational disciplines. And we really adopted that. But the thing that they really coined that I think helped so many people is the role of the visionary and the role of the integrator. And they summarize that better in the book Rocket Fuel, so if you're a visionary, you're the person who can see the front of the puzzle box in color. But if you were to take that lid off, dump all the puzzle pieces out, the visionary would be like, do not have the patience to figure out how to put this puzzle together. The integrator, on the other hand, is the one that can say, okay, these pieces are the corners. I'm going to plug those in first. And then this was the center, and they can start putting the pieces in place. So in the real estate guys world, Russ was the front of the box person. He could see that this is what I want it to look like. But the second that puzzle box got dumped out, it was like overwhelmed. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what goes for where first. And I want everything done yesterday. That's a visionary. And then an integrator is the person that says, okay, so here's the scope and sequence. This is how we're going to get it executed. This is the pieces we need in place first. And then these are the people we need in place. So I was that. I was the integrator in the real estate guys world. And ironically, I scored very high on the visionary and integrator test. So they say anything over 70 is high. And I think I'm like a 92 integrator and 88 visionary. So I have the ability to sit in both seats, and I've sat in both seats. So right now I'm visionary, organized to scale, and my company is really integrators to other visionaries. And so it lets me speak the visionary language because I am a visionary, and I also have sat in the integrator seat, so I can speak the integrator language as well. And when you get those two communicating and knowing which lanes they're in, they can really be very synergistic and go so much faster and not step on each other's toes. So really having that respect is key in that relationship.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com.
If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. When you stepped into that relationship of integrator as president of the real estate guys, what was that process like for you? Because when you described your timeline, I'd imagine you were relatively young. You still are. So you're stepping into this leadership role. What was that like for you to do that, especially with your father being someone that you had to lead? So
I've actually done it twice. So the first time was when I was 16, and that was over 20 years ago. And I was learning. I was young. I didn't understand effective leadership management. I was stumbling through it. I was a little bit more direct and less tactful. I was more results oriented than I was people focused. So there was a lot of things that I have evolved into over the years and learned that it's more important to develop the people and let them do the tactical work than to micromanage and such. The second time around, I had a lot more experience. I had more experience from just with what my experience was with the real estate guys, but I also had experience from a partner, and I had built a successful turnkey rental property business in the Great Lakes area. So I had experience in that. I had some more experience with content marketing that I didn't have previously with other brands. So that really allowed me the second time around to establish infrastructures and systems that could scale. So the second time around, my mother had just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So it was like we have no choice. Our back's against the wall. This is what we're doing. And I had enough of a track record that the trust between Robert and Russ was already there because I had done it previously. And I really embodied the vision and the mission and the values of the real estate guys because it was ingrained in me, if you will, since a very young age. So it was not really a conversation of what it was going to look like. It was, this is the vision, Stace, you handle it. And I did. And I just put the people in place and the systems and the structure. And that same system and structure still is what we're operating today. And it's now called Organized to Scale, which at the time it wasn't. And the great thing about that is Russ and I had immense time freedom. I spent the last 18 months of my mom's life with her. I was there holding her hand when her soul transitions, as was my father. And the business grew and the business was more profitable. So that's actually the birthplace of Organized to Scale, because all of his audience are real estate investors, real estate syndicators, real estate entrepreneurs. And they saw what we did and said, wow, can you do that for me? And I didn't know if we could really scale multiple businesses. I didn't know if I could run 30 companies at one time. Turns out we can. I didn't know that at the time though. So I had to architect the ability to organize and scale multiple businesses, which was the next iteration. And the leadership growth for me has been huge as well, because as you scale, you do something that we call delegate and elevate, which also comes from traction. And that is where you look at what your sweet spot is and what's on your plate. And you say, okay, what lines up and is in the bucket of my sweet spot, I'm going to keep that. And then whatever is not in the bucket of my sweet spot, I'm going to delegate. And so you slowly start delegating off of your plate things that aren't in your sweet spot. But when you really start scaling is when you start delegating things that are in your sweet spot. And you know you're really good at it, and you know you're really competent at it, and you know you can be best in the world at it, yet you still don't have the capacity. So then your sweet spot starts getting parsed where you're like, okay, the only thing I can do is this one thing. And even though I'm good at all of these other things, great at all of these other things, and this is my sweet spot, I've got to start delegating those. That's a tricky shift.
I feel like I've done a good job of delegating and finding others to do those things that I'm just not very good at or don't want to do. But then there are some things that I enjoy, like editing this podcast is something I did for 5 years. And then I finally said, you know what? I'm going to hire someone to do it. And I'm a professional editor. Like I am in the editors union. So like if anyone should be editing my podcast, it should be me. But then I made that switch and it freed up so much more time. You mentioned having multiple businesses going on at the same time and leveraging this operate to scale system to like make all of those run really well. What's that like to have multiple businesses and be juggling those at the same time? Have you found a system? Obviously you have, but tell us about the system that you have in place to make all of those work.
So we've iterated, because the original system that we thought would work, the world gave us feedback that, we have got some gaps and things, so we have realigned. But the way we do it is we pair visionaries with integrators based on their growth goals and their personalities. So not every integrator is created equal. Not every visionary is created equal. So there's visionaries that may be more system oriented and their sweet spot is more tactical or more systems oriented. And then there are visionaries who are more really true entrepreneurial visionaries are more wired towards sales, marketing, brand ambassador, strategic relationships, big sales. That's really the scaling visionaries are usually more wired that way. And we take that profile and say, okay, you have a tendency to overanalyze, or you have a tendency to be hard charging. That's great. We want you to be like that. And we're going to pair you with somebody that complements it. So they're going to dot your I's and cross your T's, because you're probably going to forget to do that. Or you're going to overanalyze. So we're going to pair you with somebody that is more hard charging to keep you from overanalyzing and getting stuck. So we do a matchmaking, visionary integrator service where we match them together. And then that integrator is trained on our OTS model and the disciplines that make the day-to-day back office operations hum. And then that integrator is also part of what we call a squad. And that squad has on it a marketing person, a tech and admin person, and an investor relations person with a bench of freelancers and specialty resources and back office sources that they can utilize. So the visionary really only has one point of contact, and that's the integrator. and they're paired based on personality. So they got this synergy going. They know their lanes. They speak well together. And then the back office side is all behind the scenes. And that is just duplicatable processes specifically for the syndicator that are proven, that have scaled for over 300 million in revenue, or in not revenue, but in capital raised. And so that allows for just it's streamlined on the back end, keeps the visionary out of the weeds, and the integrator gets to be that liaison between the tactical team and the visionary's vision.
Everything you just described sounds wonderful, but I'm trying to lock into like what Operate to Scale does. Like, are you finding all these different people and almost like an employment agency, finding them and putting them into place? Are they VAs? I mean, how are you bringing all this talent together?
It's a little bit of, so the 3-day is like strategic planning. So that's more of like a consulting strategy session. And that could be standalone. Somebody says, hey, you know what? I've got a team. I just need the structure. Well, great. Let's do a 3-day to get you the right structure. And then we'll plug your people in and you can keep it running. Then there's people who are saying, hey, I don't even have the architect stuff, and I don't have any of the essential infrastructure built. So my house isn't built. So I can't even plug team members or VAs or anybody in because I don't even have a house built. So that's when we would do both steps. We would basically do the architect step where we do the 3-day and strategize what they're looking for, what looking to achieve in their business. And then the second step is where we build it. And then after we build it, they may say, actually, I want to plug my own people in and I want to lead, manage, and hold accountable and run it myself. Then that's great. You could do that too. You could take the house and then go find some tenants and go find a property manager and get it all squared away on your own. Or there's people who are like, I don't want to deal with, tenants and day-to-day administrative folks. I'd rather just be hands off, have my one conversation with an integrator, and you guys handle everything else. Then we can do that as well. So we basically have everyone on our payroll, and then you utilize the resources that you need on demand. And that allows you to scale up or scale down. If you're in an active raise and you need more resources, then we resource and plan for that. If you're not in a raise, then you don't have people sitting on your payroll.
And you've geared your business to syndicators, people who are raising money. Does that follow through to asset management as well and investor communications?
We don't do the asset management side of it, but we do the investor communication side of it. So the way we think of it is you have your syndication business, which is like your hub. And then this is your capital raising hub. So it's the brand that you are building. It's you as your philosophy around investing that lives in your hub. And then you may go do a multifamily deal. You may do a portfolio of single family homes. You may do ATM machines. You may do, energy. You may do some other deal. That's a deal structured. You create a new bank account, new entity, you capital raise for that, but it's plugged into the hub because there's economies of scale in your hub that you can leverage and duplicate, like investor onboarding or email communication or your investor portal. That can all be part of your hub. And then your deal docs and your deal structure and your return structure is going to be deal specific. And we really let the syndicators create that. And then managing the assets, either they're doing it themselves because they are the asset, like they are the operator, or they're partnering with an operator. And in that case, the operator is managing the asset, or they're co-sponsoring, when the case the main sponsor of a capital raise would be managing that. So those three variables depend on kind of how the syndicator is structured, but we focus on the hub of it. And then your deal gets plugged into the hub, but your structure of the deal and managing of the deal is on a deal by deal basis.
What's your favorite hack or app?
Okay, well, I have a philosophy around this. I feel like you could get overwhelmed with the amount of tools and apps and resources out there. And I'm a firm believer that if you don't have a methodology, don't get a tool. So if you don't know exactly how you're going to use something and you have a plan to deploy it, then it probably is just going to create more chaos than not. So I don't know if I have a favorite one, but one of the ones that we use that has been super collaborative, I know people are all over the place, is we use G Suite for pretty much all of our operational organization because it's super collaborative, and that's been a great resource for us.
How would people find out more about you, get a hold of you, find out more about your business as well?
So I have for your audience a couple of free resources where we dive deeper on the 3-step process of architect, build, and operate. And if they send an email to scale@organizedtoscale.com, they can get a copy of it.
Stacy, it's been a real pleasure talking with you. And thanks for helping us understand your method of scaling, especially how it applies to syndicators and people raising money. It's been really fascinating learning about your history and your relationship with the Real Estate Guys show, which was very helpful to me when I was starting out. Definitely enjoyed the content there. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing everything with us today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was great connecting with you.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB & Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.